And therefore, citizens, we can no longer be blind to what has been occurring these last several generations. The growing recognition that though we are governed by the particular British monarchy for many generations already here, we have become the less and less British and the more and more
American.
Self-evident as well, is it not? My fellow Americans. And I ask you, where does that now end?
Doesn't.
Thank you, madam. Boldly spoken. It does not end. We become the more American every day. His Majesty's Parliament has certainly recognized this and dares to keep a pace with us through its laws. And the British law is a beautiful system, grant you that. In my opinion, it is the finest system of law created on this planet for the freedom of the individual, and yet it appears to fall short for all of us here throughout these colonies. And yet, even His Majesty's law cannot stop what is occurring every day. So many of you, descendant of those who have sought these shores generations ago, others recently arrived, and so it will continue, nati notorabilis, unto generations yet unborn. I have always said, will oppressed humanity find no asylum on this globe? We are that asylum. And by whose providence? I hope, citizens, that during our time here, this short time, before at 3 o'clock, we will have someone visit us to inform us of the rest of the day and its proceedings. That during the short time we have, I might provoke within you a recognition of our rights, as well as questions and curiosities that you might point to me directly. And therefore, before I seek your answers and your questions, I have a few opinions of my own that I would like to share, if I have not done so already. I find it rather curious that as I was riding eastwards here, no one knowing who I am, could you imagine if an individual's likeness could be printed in the newspapers the same way as words and sentences are? They might be hesitant to venture anywhere. Everybody would know what they look like. I was able to hear along the route comments being made that this Jefferson, this Burgess from Albemarle County, has had a pamphlet printed recently. You may find it in the post office in Williamsburg, entitled A Summary View of the Rights of British America. That he is wont to purport within that pamphlet what he considers to be the natural rights and liberties of the family of man across this globe. Oh, he makes such profound statements that the King of England holds no more power over us here in these colonies than the Saxon kings held over their subjects who left the various kingdoms of Saxony to venture to the island of Great Britain. And yet they are wont to consider, as I have heard, that this Jefferson must indeed be the greatest hypocrite. Well, I heard it directly. For he is wont to purport the innate rights of man, and yet we know Mr. Jefferson is one who stands to prohibit the same, for he is the owner of many hundreds of... Oh, so you have heard it. Citizens, I would go to any extent to protect and defend your right to hold your opinion as you choose. As I said earlier, that is the greatest of our rights. But rest you assured, I have the right to a reply. And my reply is distinct, it is direct. Am I alone?
No.
Thank you. In fact, I recognize several of my fellow planters here this day. Several of my neighbors from Albemarle, gentlemen, you know directly to what I refer, and that is the fact that we are bound together in what has been a most inhumane habit and custom for several generations. That we now realize here solely in the colony of Virginia that we are more than 50% of enslaved in our population. I'll grant you, not as much as South Carolina, where it is near 75% of enslaved. And there has been a continual mumbling and grumbling. Now what are we to do? How are we to extricate ourselves from a future in which we will continue to support a growing system of labor well beyond 50% of the populace? Oh, I grant you that is wont to divide us already betwixt our northern brethren and all of us here south of the line drawn by Messrs. Mason and Dixon. And who can deny, citizens, that I have not remained silent upon this subject? Oh, many know And several years ago, when I was elected to the House of Burgesses, I stood in my first session there in the spring of '69 to call for permission to begin a debate in order to end the importation of slaves. And many a gentleman still smirk in this city to recognize that I was immediately asked to be seated, trounced upon in the liberty of my opinion, and provoking a consternation amongst my fellow Burgesses. Who is this upstart from the wilderness? Who is this turncoat unto his class? Well, it certainly has been observed these last several years that I have not been silent any longer. I have continued to put my pen to paper. I have continued to offer my opinion vocally and freely upon this subject. And therefore, if you have the opportunity to purchase one of my pamphlets, A Summary View on the Rights of British America in Our Post Office, you will acquaint yourself with the essential truth as I have written, that it is the general desire of those colonies in which slavery first began to cease any further importations. And yet our recent petitions in order to place an end to that importation, our recent prohibitions, our recent duties we hope that might amount to a prohibition, have continually received His Majesty's negative. Let us now take a stand to ignore the devices of His Majesty's government. Let us now take a stand to come together freely in a building of consensus that we might move forward to do what we know in our heart and our conscience is correct. Not only to end the importation of slaves here, to begin to end the expansion of it west of the Appalachian Mountains, and begin to end the laws of slavery on our books. We will not see a restitution tomorrow, but let this be a beginning, and let us work towards that dawn when generations yet unborn will not know simply a life of being either slave or master, but rather will know a life where they may be ultimately free to carry their liberties given to them by their Creator, and thereby to show the rest of the world that here in America we speak not for ourselves alone, but for the entire human race.